I was just about to come to that, because we were talking about the fact that the federal government did not create, well, not the fact, but the idea that the federal government did not create the states, but that the states, came together to create the federal government. And still, people say that, well, that idea is something that you really have to think through.
Yes.
In the sense that when you look at how states have been created over the years, it's not like people keep clamoring to the federal government that we want to be a state, and so you get that idea. It's something that has to really be thought through.
Yes.
But what you have in reality is that the federal government keeps creating states.
Yeah.
You agreed on the creation of how many more states? Is it 18?
Eight more states.
8 more states. And people are wondering, how is this feasible with the idea of the fact that we're looking at funding and unity?
It's ludicrous. I think it's one of the absurd recommendations that made their way into the conference report. It's not something I agree with, but it's symptomatic of a bigger problem. It's symptomatic of the problem that Nigerians are becoming so ethnically identified. There's this regression into our ethnic identities, and it will never stop until there's more cohesion in this country. So the need to keep dividing states and creating new states is a call for a new sub-ethnic identity that people keep insisting on.
And not for development?
I hear this argument that states create development, but if you look at this country and you choose four constitutions in our development, 60, 63, 79, and 99, the more the central government has become powerful, the central government has become more powerful across each constitution. Up until 1999, it's the most powerful constitution for the federal government. Nigeria has become poorer. Regressively, it's a fact. Between 1960 to 1999, Nigeria has become poorer, relatively.
Even though we earn more.
From a per capita point of view, Nigeria has become poorer. Now, the government has become more powerful. We've had more states. So, on an anecdotal observation alone, you can see that states don't necessarily create development. If development has anything to do with poverty, and I'm sure it does.
What about those who argue that it may just be plugging those leakages, that if we sort that out, we may just be on our way to maybe an average performance?
Well, efficiency is the answer to development, in my opinion.
Some people will say, sorry, Suleiman, again, some people will say that it depends on what the definition of development is. I mean, if you're looking at infrastructure, we're just recently in Delta State where they were celebrating 23 years of their state creation. And
I watched that. Yeah.
Right there in Delta, I think the conference approved or recommended that Anyoma State be created. And we're wondering how that will affect the fact that, Asaba is the capital of Delta State. And the idea was that if Asaba weren't the capital of that particular state, maybe an airport would not have been situated there, assuming Delta was still under Edo State, for instance, or former Bendel State, as it were. So I think that a lot of people will say that it depends on what development you're looking at. If you're looking at it in terms of GDP, maybe we'll be asking, are we creating wealth in this state that we are creating? Or are we just looking to the federal government to keep disbursing the wealth that is created in other parts of the country?
Well, my pushback would be to say to you that when Chief Awolowo was the premier of the Western region, Ife was not the capital of the region when he built University of Ife. Ashejire was not the capital of the region when the dam was funded and developed. So if you have a developmental and efficient government approach, you can develop a vast territory. The state of Texas, Nigeria fits in the state of Texas, if I'm not mistaken, more than once. Certainly fits in the state of California more than once. And yet there is cross-border development. There's still rural areas. There will always be rural areas. For the benefit of the society, to have rural areas is a good thing. So I'm not even sure to clamor development in every nook and cranny of a state is something that is either desirable or something that is even possible.
I think, taking my mind back, I remember I think the governor met with the Lagos delegates in February of this year before you all went to Abuja, and critically he said, well, they will talk about the special status for Lagos State, talk about the issue of state police, and even the sharing formula. But again, if you look at it holistically, what would you say was the critical breakthrough of this particular conference for you as a delegate?
Well, the disappointment certainly was we didn't even get to ventilate properly the special status argument
For the state.
We submitted it, but we didn't get the plenary to vote on it, which I felt was very tragic. But and therefore we didn't get it as an approved recommendation. And I think the real thing is because people are afraid of that comment, and they say, well, what's so special about Lagos? I mean, well, why? If this geopolitical zone thing will raise its head. If Lagos is going to get special status, then we should have 6 special statuses across the country. And to say that, with due respect, is to ignore the uniqueness of Lagos. It's not has nothing to do with my representation, but it's a fact that you cannot ignore, that Lagos is not is not in a normal situation. It's the only former federal capital that we have. It's the only state that has well in excess, however you count it, well in excess of 20 million people. It's the only place where you can stand up in the marketplace and shout in your language and somebody will answer you, wherever you are from in this country. So it has that uniqueness. It bears so many burdens. It bears the burden of the port. It bears the burden of the population. And to say that it should fend for itself alone as one of 36, without placing emphasis on the contribution it makes to our non-oil economy and the contribution it makes to our social fabric, I think is to really be defeatist, to put it mildly. And that's a regret that we have.
Well, again, for some, they think that, well, somehow the conference embarked on a review of the Constitution. It might not be directly, but somehow, would you say that was what you achieved at that particular conference, a subtle review of that 1999 Constitution, or our Constitution as it presently is?
Yeah, I think we did. We did in more ways than one, and I don't think it's to be regretted. I think if you argue the restructure of certain parts of your political, economic, and social framework, you will eventually affect the Constitution, being the basic framework that holds everything together. I mean, there is a portion of the Constitution, without being too legalistic, Chapter 2, that contains the policy directives that the framers of the Constitution felt that the Nigerian state should pursue. Those ideals are the things that Nigerians want government to do for themselves, for them. Shelter, water, power, no corruption. Those are the expectations of Nigerians. Now, since the formation of that Constitution, the enactment of the Constitution in 1999, it has become sacrosanct that those provisions are unenforceable. So you can't hold the government accountable to the provisions. Those expectations is rather absurd. And the recommendation that came out of the conference was that no, they are now they should be enforceable. And that a normal citizen should be able to call a state government to order and say, what have you done to put a house on the market for me? What have you done to stop corruption? And sue. It will help public interest litigation. I mean, if this was to come to pass and there was a Gani Fahimi alive, he would be in heaven all over again, because that has been an obstacle to holding government accountable. And that recommendation came out. And that is to amend the Constitution.
All right, just now, a while ago, you spoke about the different constitutions we've had and how Nigeria has become poorer, more power concentrated at the center.
Yeah.
But in your recommendations at this conference with respect to the elections, you did say that the recommendation was that they wanted the center, INEC, to conduct the elections, including the state elections.
Absolutely.
And does that speak to what you just spoke about?
No, it doesn't. Again, that's another regrettable recommendation that came out. They did recognize the power of the states to organize local government elections in conjunction with INEC. There's a suspicion that Nigerians generally have for state authority. And I think it's a hangover from the federal government and from the military days, where everything that was good came from the federal government. And we've seen in our experience in this democracy that many things that are good come from the states. So many states have excelled in ways in which they've taught the federal government what to do. Many policies, and I'm not going to go into specifics before you accuse me of strict bias. But many
Especially
things,
having admitted your bias.
absolutely. But many states have taught the federal government what to do for the people. And
Yeah.
they've